All right, we're back for another episode. Cameron here this week. Noah Lizer. He should be back next week, so we look forward to having him back next week. Today we got to talk about a big issue though with the NFL. That's got to be talked about. These running backs are underpaid, and I actually did the dive in, the breakdown. I looked at a couple guys, looked at the top paid for receivers, top paid for running backs, per year, and the amount of wear and tear these running backs put on their body compared to these receivers. And don't get me wrong, these receivers do get hit, but they don't get hit the way running backs do, okay? There's a big difference compared to getting hit with somebody who's 300 plus pounds and getting wrapped up and getting hit by 4 or 5 guys at the line versus a receiver who's getting hit by somebody a little bit less weight or around the same weight as them and taken out of bounds or tackled at the hip. These running backs get banged up, and they get banged up quick, which is understandable why these owners don't want to pay banged up players. But the thing is they don't realize most of these running backs do the exact same thing as receivers do. So diving in here, we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to look at Josh Jacobs' stats. Now, all these stats that I'm going to pull up are from 2020 to 2022, okay? Excuse me. But Josh Jacobs, 15 games. In those 15 games, he had 273 attempts. That was ranked third amongst all running backs. He had 1,065 yards, ranked 8th. His rushing touchdowns, he had 12 of them, which put him 5th, okay? 45 targets when it came to the passing game, 33 catches. Okay, both those put him at 24th overall in the running when it comes to running backs in the receiving game. He had 238 yards receiving, put him 25th, and 0 touchdowns. Okay? There's not going to be a lot of touchdowns receiving-wise, and if you do get a couple, good pass-catching running back, he's more likely going to be close to the end zone, a little screen pass. But comparing that from 2020, we go into 2021, he got a couple categories he got better, and then some he got worse in. He stepped back in the running game, attempts, 217. So he had less attempts. He was 11th in that year. In the same amount of games, 15. 873 yards, though. Not over 1,000 yards rushing, so he stepped back again, like I said, in the running game, 15th overall. 9 rushing touchdowns. Not a huge drop-off. 3 touchdowns. It's not a huge drop-off for me. He's 1 away from double digits again. Okay, 64 targets. That's 9th when it comes in 2021 when it comes to running backs. He was 5th in catches with 54, 14th. So he went from 25 in receiving that year in 2020 to 14th. And you could see that he earned 110 more yards receiving. Still 0 touchdowns. But you look at his running, he didn't drop off much when it came to rushing, attempts, and all that. But he took a big jump when it came to targets, catches, and receiving. Take a step in the next year. Now he's back to the running again. 340 attempts is excessive. But when you had a quarterback like Derek Carr who had consistency issues all throughout the year, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have those issues. So 340 attempts, though, is completely mind-boggling to me. For him have that many attempts and not as many from the backup running backs is crazy to me. 1,653 yards, that was ranked first, okay? To have a number 1 ranked running back in yards and second in attempts, that should correlate right there. That should be, that should be how it is. 12 rushing touchdowns. So we go back to 2020. He had 12, then 9, back to 12. Okay, that was 6 this year in rushing touchdowns. Go to the passing game. 64 targets, the same amount as last year, but he was 11th ranked this year. He had 53 catches, 1 less than the year before, and he was ranked 10th. And then he adds another 52 yards receiving to the resume, putting him higher up there. He had 400. Again, 0 receiving touchdowns. Now compare him to somebody like Stephon Diggs, okay? A better overall quarterback, a better system built around him in Buffalo. 16 games for him. In 2020, he was first in targets with 166. He was first in catches with 127, and he was first in yards with 1,535 with 8 touchdowns, which puts him 15th when it comes to touchdowns for a receiver. Jump forward to 2021, 17 games, 164 targets, 103 catches. That's 5th and 8th when it comes to rankings. 1,225 yards in 7th. 10 touchdowns. He took a step back in the receiving game, not by much. He had not a lot less catches, 24 less catches and 2 less targets, but he was 300 yards less. And that comes with how explosive Buffalo's offense is. I get that. Go to 2022 last year. He didn't have to play that last game of the year. They kind of clinched at that point. They didn't want to risk their starters getting hurt. Smart on Buffalo's part. 10 less targets, 5 more catches. Again, 5th and 3 again. He's staying consistent in the top 10. 1,429 yards. 5th is receiving yards again, and 11th in touchdowns, or 11 touchdowns for 3rd place. Okay, that's the way it needs to be for a receiver, and for him to have that comparison right there, when a running back has more wear and tear, and they're putting up, looking at Jacobs now. He had 45 targets, 64 targets, and 64 targets. Now, going back to Stephon Diggs, you have 166 targets, 164, and 154. So his targets decreased. Jacobs went up and stayed consistent. It's about 100 less targets, but when you have 100 less targets and running the ball over 200 times in 1 year and running over 270 the next 2, that is unbelievable production from these running backs. They get banged up. They get hit early. They sometimes break tackles, slip tackles, go through another 3 or 4 guys before they even go down. Yeah, you don't want to pay a guy like that, but maybe these receivers don't need to get paid as much as they are. Because here's another example, and this is where contracts can either help a team or hurt a team. We're going to look at 2 examples. Let's go to New York Giants. Saquon Barkley, 2020, he got hurt after his 2 games. So I'm not putting his rank out there because he's going to be all the way at the bottom. Okay, we already know he's in the top 200-ish range. 2 games, 19 attempts when it comes to rushing, 34 yards, 0 touchdowns. Okay, he was hurt in 2 games. In those 2 games, though, he had 9 targets and 6 catches for 60 yards. So he got more usage in the passing game when it came to production. They couldn't run. And that speaks a lot about the offensive line for the Giants in the year of 2020. 2021, he comes back from an injury, 13 games. 162 attempts put him 26 overall. Okay, Jacobs had 217 attempts in 2021 and had 11th overall. It's about 50-ish. Let's see, about 48 attempts more Jacobs had than Barkley. Yardage-wise, though, Barkley had 593. That put him 35th overall when it comes to running backs. Then looking at it, you have 2 rushing touchdowns from Barkley. That's not great production. However, look at what he did in the passing game. 57 targets, 41 catches. He had 12th in targets and 19th in catches. 263 yards receiving. Not a huge production there. Okay? That's good for running backs, but when you're a pass-catching running back and a rushing running back, you want to see a little bit more. Now, bear with me. He did come off that injury. I understand that. Maybe that's the reason why. But overall, it's a good year. You would like to see the touchdowns go up more, obviously, but it's a lot harder for them because either they got to break for a big run or they're getting goal line touches. And sometimes in the goal line, after running for a big run, you're not getting the ball. He can break off an 80-yard touchdown or 80-yard run, get down at the 5, and they're going for a slant for a touchdown to a receiver. 2022, though, bouncing back to this year. 16 games he played, they clinched it, and they went into the playoffs. Week 17 they didn't play. So he had 3 more games on this slate this time. 295 attempts. Almost 300 attempts now. 1,312 yards, 1,312 yards. That put him 4th in both attempts and yardage. And he's 8th in touchdowns, going from 2 rushing touchdowns to 10. Okay? Going to his receiving part of it. 76 targets. That put him 6th. 57 catches. That put him 7th. He's in the top 10 now in almost every category except for this one, receiving yards. There was a big year for running backs last year when it came to pass catching. 400 yards got you 8th. 338th got you 14th. That says a lot about how these running backs were used in the passing game. Now let's take a look at one of his teammates. And then we're going to get into the contract between the two. And I'm going to show you those stats here in a minute because this is just absurd to me. But let's talk about Kenny Golladay. He had 2020 last year with the Lions. He got hurt after 5 games. So in 5 games, he was 32 targets. I put his stats up here considering how many games he played versus Barkley. Okay, that's 1/3 of a season versus not even 1/4 of a season. So 5 games for Kenny Golladay. 32 targets. It's 1/12. 20 catches. 1/12. 339. Or 338 yard-wise. 99 overall when it came to out of the ranks. And 2 touchdowns. So then you go to 2021. 14 games now for Kenny Golladay after coming off an injury. This is the first year with the Giants. He had 14 games, 74 targets. That's 50th. Okay. Barkley had 57 targets. 37 catches for Golladay. That's 74th overall ranked amongst the wide receivers. So 37 catches for Golladay. But oh look, Barkley had 41 catches. And that put him 19th when it came to receiving. Golladay had 521 yards in 14 games. He had one more game than Barkley in 2021. Barkley put up 263. Pretty much half of what he put up. And as a receiver, that's your job, is to get yards, get catches, get targets, and score touchdowns. You're supposed to do that as a receiver. Catch the ball, run with the ball, get yards, get touchdowns. When it comes to Barkley, his job is supposed to take the handoff and run as far as he can with it. If he gets in the end zone, he gets in the end zone. He breaks off for 20 yards, he breaks off for 20, he breaks off for 3, he breaks off for 3. You want to see production out of your running back when it comes to running, but when your running back is putting up almost better numbers minus the yardage than what is supposed to be your number one receiver on the Giants, his first year with the Giants in 2021, that just says a lot about the product with the running backs. These running backs perform. They're not underperforming. They perform. 2022, Golladay, 12 games, 17 targets. He played 12 games, okay? 17 targets in 12 games says a lot about how bad Kenny Golladay was. 6 catches, that put him 156 overall. 81 yards in 12 games. 152. And 1 touchdown. So he had 2 touchdowns with the Lions in 5 games, 0 with 14 games, and 1 with 12 games. Kenny Galladay's best years were in 2018, 2019. If you really want to go back and look at those stats yourself. He had 1,000-yard seasons those years. Then you have 2020. He got hurt after 5 games. Nagging injury set him down. I get it. Then you get a massive contract. And why don't we look at that contract? Because this is ridiculous when you look at the pay comparison. By the way, Barkley's news just broke today on July 25th. Earlier today, before I even recorded this, that he got a 1-year deal. And that's in here. So looking at Barkley's stat versus Galladay's stat from 2020 to 2022 combined, okay? That is a combined of 21 games total for Golladay versus 31 for Barkley. So there is some game differential there. Okay, there is. There's going to be. 26. There'd be 31. Actually, no. Correction. That's 31 both. Both of them had 31 games that year. My math's a little off. I apologize. So they both had 31 games over the last 3 years. Barkley has 661 receiving yards in 3 years with 2 receiving touchdowns. Golladay has 940 receiving yards in 3 years with 3 touchdowns. 1 less touchdown and a little under 300 yards difference. while Barkley's putting up 1,939 yards, almost 2,000 yards in 3 years. Oh, by the way, he had 14 combined touchdowns total. 10 of those coming last year in the rushing. And then 2 receiving and 2 rushing in 2021. Now we look at the latest contracts. Barkley's contract broke earlier today. 1 year, $11 million. It's going to be $10 million a year for 1 year, obviously. But then he gets $1 million in incentives. So that's the deal. Or $1 million signing bonus. He can make it 12 with a $1 million incentive. I apologize about that. Kenny Golladay signed a 4-year deal for $72 million. The production is nowhere near the same. Kenny Golladay was looked at as one of the better receivers after those 2018-2019 seasons, and then you turn around and you look at this and you're looking at it as where did this go? Where did it go? Because he has not performed, and he got a massive contract for being the performer that he was in 2018-2019, and they banked off of him being better after 2020. You got a small sample size in 2020 in 5 games. He was arguably one of the top 5 round picks in fantasy football when this went down. So for him to get a 4-year, $72 million deal and Barkley to get 1 year, $11 million is just absolutely pitiful on the owners and the NFL. Pay the running backs. You need to pay these running backs. If you're worried about them getting hurt, don't use them as much. Make guys like Kenny Golladay perform, and if not, then dump his contract. Yes, you're going to have a cap hit. Yes, you're going to have dead cap. Figure out a way to figure that out. That's what you get paid to do as a GM and owners. That's what you guys correlate with. That's where you guys figure out what do we need to do, how do we make this team better, and where does our money best suit the team. Right now, your money best suits the team by giving a similar contract. That needs to go to Barkley. The last player to get a contract like that is going to start off in our next slide. And looking at our next slide here is top paid yearly between running backs and wide receivers. Christian McCaffrey makes $16 million a year. That's the number 1 running back paid per year. He's been injury prone. He makes $16 million a year. Tyreek Hill got traded from the Chiefs to the Miami Dolphins. He makes $30 million a year. Yes, he's one of the fastest receivers in the league, if not the fastest. Yes, he's very good at doing his job. But that's a huge gap. $14 million. When one person puts their body on the line more than the other. Yeah, you can say it's by choice, but it's not really a choice when you're talented at one position. You know, if that's where you're talented at is that position, you play at that position, or you ain't making it to the NFL. You might not even make it to college if you're like, oh, I want to be a quarterback, but you're best suited to play corner. Figure that one out. Looking at the rest of this, we're going to run through the rest of the running backs. Alvin Kamara is going to make $15 million. Henry's going to make $12.5. Nick Chubb makes $12.2 million per year. And for him to speak up to the media, for somebody who doesn't speak at all, says an awful lot about where these running backs feel they are getting undervalued. This is their stance on it. For a guy who doesn't say anything during games, won't trash talk, won't do anything, won't really say anything mean about a teammate or complain about anything other than we're not winning, is saying that this is not okay for the most part. And kind of playing it on the fence, but also stating that, you know, he's being vocal over this, says a lot. Aaron Jones, $12 million a year. Barkley got his $10 million. Again, $1 million in signing. That's where that comes, the $11 million, and $1 million in incentives for his deal. Josh Jacobs, $10 million a year. Tony Pollard, $10 million a year. James Conner makes $7 million. And Miles Sanders makes $6.35. Those bottom two blow my mind. Also, if you notice, 4 of those guys have bold text Those are guys who are free agents next year. Derrick Henry's been hurt multiple years in a row. He's a free agent next year. Saquon just got 1 year added on. He's going to be a free agent next year. Josh Jacobs, $10 million. He's going to be a free agent next year. And Tony Pollard, the only running back that the Cowboys have right now, other than Ezekiel Elliott maybe re-signing, which I highly doubt at this point, because he's going to cost more than that. They need to figure that out. Excuse me. Looking at the receiver side now. Tyreek Hill, we already went over that, $30 million. Devontae Adams, $28 million. Again, I am not saying that these wide receivers should be paid less. It's that running backs need to be paid a little bit more. I'm not saying pay them $25, $28 million, but if you're making $12 million at $12.2 million, for instance, for Nick Chubb, who's a workhorse, by the way, he's squatting 600 pounds on both sides. That's absurd. Or excuse me, 600 pounds in total. But just to look at that, and to see that they keep their bodies in shape like that, and to see their after, the year's over with, after all their workouts and their rest and how they take care of their body, these running backs are very poorly paid. Nick Chubb at $12.2 million. Yeah, when he was first coming off his rookie deal, that was a good price. Now he's looking at closer. I think he needs to be making closer to $18 to $20 million a year. He's a workhorse, and he produces numbers. Going back to the receivers, though, $26.7 million for Kupp, $25 million for A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown earned that money. I don't know why the Titans gave him away. That's for another story, though. DK Metcalf, $24 million. Diggs, $24 million. Diggs, like we stated, he has earned that money. He's in the top 10 in every category every single year except for touchdowns in 2020 when he had 15. Or he was 15th overall. Deebo Samuel, $23.8. He just got paid recently. Terry McLaurin, $22.7. DJ Moore, $20.6 million, and Keenan Allen, $20 million. Keenan Allen can't stay healthy either. You want to talk about you're worried about running backs being hurt and banged up? Keenan Allen's played less games than most of these running backs on this list, other than maybe James Conner and Alvin Kamara. This is something that needs to be talked about and needs to be fixed, because this is just a disgrace. It really is. So hopefully we figure out an issue here, or figure out a solution for this issue, because something needs to give, or you're going to see some of these top talented running backs who honestly probably have another 5 to 6 good years left in them, the way they take care of themselves, especially a guy like Nick Chubb and like Barkley. Guys like that are going to be around for another 5 to 6 years. They're going to be 30, 31 before they're ready to quit the NFL, or their body's ready to quit on them. Hopefully we have a solution soon. If you don't follow us already, please smash the subscribe button and make sure your notifications are on for when our videos drop. They dropped every single Wednesday at 12 unless stated otherwise on our Twitter page. So go follow our Twitter page as well at Inside Stadium. I'll put the link up here. We have both of our host accounts on there as well. You can follow us there. We post what we think based on our personal favorite teams. So make sure you follow us on there as well if you want any other details about our team and how much we dive into those systems or moves or anything like that. Again, hopefully the NFL fix this issue, because we need to figure out something. Something's got to give. Again, I hope Elizer's back next week. He should be. Other than that, make sure you follow us on Twitter, subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one.